Alright, so let's talk about how to make walls. You can see right here that I've started. I have the outline of two different walls. So the first thing that I did was pick my material. For this purpose, I chose cardboard. Cardboard is a wonderful material for walls in 1/4 inch scale. I don't recommend foam core. Foam core is just really thick. So in scale, sometimes it can look wrong. It can look too thick in the 1/4 inch scale. So cardboard is really nice for this. I also think that the crescent board or the illustration board is really nice for walls. Though if I were you, I would recommend saving your crescent board until you're working in the final model. For the purpose of a rough model, which is kind of what I'm demoing here, I'm going to be using cardboard. So the first thing that I did was I measured out my walls. I wanted to have 8-foot wide walls by 10 feet tall. So I measured that out. I recommend using your plastic triangle when you're doing some of this smaller model making. It can make it go a little more quickly. You can also use the grid that is on your cutting mat to make sure that things are square. So I just made sure I had a nice flat edge here first, and then I started putting down some ticks. I don't have a triangle, but if I were you, and then I would use my triangle, make sure that it's aligned to the bottom of this to kind of drag those ticks up, right? And lay out my walls. You can see that one of these walls also has a door, so I've included that. Even though this is a rough model, just drawing something like that is really helpful for understanding the set in your design. So to do that, I first decided that I wanted to start it 1 foot from the edge of the wall, so I used my scale ruler to measure out 1 foot. I then made sure to research the average size of a door. So I measured out the width of a standard door and the height of a standard door, connected all of those lines using a triangle, using the scale ruler, and I have my door. So now that I have these things laid out, lined up, I don't know. I'm going to take my metal ruler, my X-Acto knife, making sure that I have a nice fresh blade on my knife and that it's secure in there. I'm going to take my ruler, making sure that the cork back side is facing down and against the material, and I'm going to just cut this out. I recommend that if you've been working on the floor to make the larger model box, the full theater, that maybe now you try moving to a table if you have the space for that. Making these smaller pieces a lot of the time can be, in my opinion, easier at a table. You can get more right up on top of it and see things better. Be sure to be aware that you don't have your fingertips too close to the edge of your ruler. You're keeping them nice and back to protect them from the knife. I'm going to take my scraps. I always keep the scraps. You never know what you might need. I'll set those to the side. I have one last cut to make down the middle here. And now I have my two walls. So now the only thing that's really left to figure out with these is how do we make the walls stand up in the model. We're going to look at a couple different methods for that. The first one is using a jack. So I have a pre-made wall here. You'll see this in a later video. And this is the jack for it. So this wall is pretty small, so it only needs one jack. If you have a much longer stretch of a wall, you're going to want multiple jacks. I would start with 2 on either end and then see if you need more in the center. And how I made this jack was all you have to do is make sure that you have a perfect 90-degree angle. You could use your triangle to do that. You can use the grid here, but make sure that you have a perfect 90-degree angle and then just cut a triangle out. You want to make sure that it's not too deep because you don't want to take up too much space in the model if you have other things behind this. This is a pretty nice distance. And that's the top view of what it looks like from above, and from the front it stands up like this, and this is what it is from the side. So the jack is a really simple method, and I love it. And I recommend making all of your jacks out of either cardboard, or the foam core is good for that too. Another thing you could do is a little tab at the bottom. If you're going to do a little tab at the bottom like this, I definitely recommend using the foam core. All I did was I cut out a little strip of foam core that was the width of this wall piece, and is about 1/4 inch. It's about 1 foot in scale deep, I would say, maybe a little more. And I just glued that to the back side of this piece, applying some glue to the edge of the foam core, and then pressed it up against the back. I made sure when I glued this together that I actually like pressed my wall up against my cutting mat and pushed this little tab up against it to make sure that I wasn't just freehand gluing it, you know, like this willy-nilly, so that it was actually going to hold. And that's what that method looks like from above. From the front, you can't see it, same as the jack. Both of these, you can't see them from the front, and from the side. You'll see this method is much more shallow, so that might be helpful for you. The other thing you can do is, let's say that you don't want to have freestanding walls, you're making like half of a room, or maybe there's multiple walls attached. How I would do that is, again, cut out your 2 walls first. It's always good to make sure, so both of these walls are 8 feet in my design. However, I actually cut this wall a little bit longer so that there was enough overhang to glue this wall to the edge of it. So I made sure that this one was just a little longer when I cut it out in scale. Just a tiny detail thing to be aware of. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my wall here that is actually butting up to meet this wall, and I'm going to do a very I'm going to do a very thin layer of glue, and you'll see right there, so I was pressing on the glue and nothing was coming out, and I was starting to get nervous that I might start pressing too hard and have a ton pour out. So when things happen like that, I just take the glue away from the actual piece and put it over like a scrap and squeeze and get my glue figured out, because I don't want to like drench this in glue and end up ruining this piece. So I don't have a ton of glue here. It's a very thin layer. Again, we don't need globs of glue for this stuff. And now I'm going to take my other wall, and I'm just going to press this right up onto it. And I'm going to apply pressure for at least 5 seconds. Looking from above, that's what it looks like. Just going to apply a little more pressure. Like so. And again, another helpful thing to use a cutting mat for, we have all these angles on it. So you see right here, this is labeled 45. So this measures a 45-degree angle running this way, which means that these two, since they're both running 45 degrees, make a 90-degree angle. I said that way more complicated than it needed to be. This corner is a 90-degree angle on your mat, as well as like these are all 90-degree angles too, so we could actually do it this way as well. But it was landing right there kind of perfectly. So you can also use this to make sure when you're gluing your walls that they're not too smushed in. I had mine a little smushed in, so I'm just winging them out, stretching them out a little bit. Yeah, so that they're much more close to being a perfect 90 degree. See that now? So again, the cutting mat, use it to your advantage for these little things. Great. And so now you can see that this is another method if you're going to actually be gluing your walls together. You don't need to do jacks or do these tabs or do extra things. If you're going to be gluing the walls together, if you just glue them together, they will stand up by themselves, but be sure to double check that they're at a nice 90-degree angle. You also could have multiple walls attached to this, or much longer walls, and this method will work. All right, so that's it for walls. And to see how I kind of took this rough model piece into this final color model world, watch the video on taking the model from rough to color. Okay, cool.